Greetings and welcome to Enigmatic. I'm a pretty frustrated person, and a lot of my frustrations stem from a philosophical place, a place of depth of thought and of being and of exploration, and of desire and prioritization of veracity and accuracy. It's a orienting practice that informs us as to how we live our lives in the world, right? And it's funny because I don't know how I want to express my frustration. And part of that is that I don't want to seem high and mighty, but at the same time, my experience is my experience. And so it's hard to even know where to go, because since I'm sharing this out loud, there is obviously some desire to be understood. But in this realm of things, I typically feel very misunderstood, because it apparently goes into depths that may be taken for granted or unseen or ignored or not accessed by many others. And that's the other issue, is that I'm not trying to make anything about this in us versus them, but it is just a noticing of distinctions and noticing in discernment, some two things that come part and parcel with philosophy. It's almost like the more you're aware of, notice I said aware and not know, but the more you're aware of, the more pissed off you can get. And I think that for me, part of my issue definitely stems from things like trauma, but also that I deeply want to be, accurate in however I orient myself in the world. And so there's a lot of things that go back and forth between me and the world. So for example, there's something that I say very often, and that's we interact more with our ideas of the physical world than we do the physical world itself. And a lot of people don't really understand what I mean by that. And it's like there's certain sensory inputs that we receive, but there's a whole lot of filtering that occurs between any conclusion and interpretation that we draw from that sensory input, and the process therein. The other thing that's going to be frustrating about this is just like I don't feel that I find words or express myself, especially philosophically, in as eloquent of a way as I used to. I am fortunate that I've been able to dial such a frustration down to wow, I just blanked out really hard. I've been able to boil the frustration to the situation and not to myself. But, I'm talking about the world and I'm talking about life, these things that seem to be right up in front of our face. And, one thing that comes up in my mind right now is that, especially in the Western world, materialism is the, predicate metaphysics that informs us about the world. And people will die on the hill arguing about things with regards to materialism without understanding where the idea of materialism comes from, what substantiates it, where it falls short, like what it is as a philosophy. People just like hear these words and then they just like throw them out there. I feel the same way about like objectivity, subjectivity. I think it's funny how it's very rarely spoken about that there's, an in-between realm called intersubjectivity. Then we have like relativity, and just like these are words and they become, buzzwords from philosophy that people don't really grasp, right? It's like a funnel or a filter, and you have the area of philosophy where a lot of these ideas come from and, generate and inform other fields of study. And they trickle down, and as it trickles down, it gets, diluted and bastardized and misused on a regular basis, so that when it comes to, people that aren't in the philosophical fray, and that unfortunately includes like scientists as well, because they oftentimes don't notice the, predicate metaphysics that they feel that they have to operate under, and not notice that there's a certain aspect of that that is also unsubstantiated. like some of these things are likely predicated, like an orientation towards a certain philosophy can also be predicated on your environment. And if it's predicated on your environment, the claims that you want to make about the world from that model are also going to be limited and not necessarily part and parcel for what reality is. So again, we're dealing more with our ideas of reality than reality itself. It seems that we always have to have a model to use, right? And so I guess like what I'm getting at is that like if there's always a model and there's always a paradigm, then within any paradigm or model we can be completely wrong. Like for all we know, we've survived as a species by coming up with things that are false in order to keep us going. These are things that we're not, we don't consider. There's also like the issues that I brought this up before of like scientific realism versus anti-realism. Like, are we seeing things through the scientific lens in the way that it actually is, or in the way that it just appears to us? And as much as we try to make things as quote unquote objective as possible, we can never escape our own subjectivity and phenomenology. And it's funny, like I really don't feel like I'm getting this out in the way that I want to, even though I'm probably flowing just fucking fine. But I guess my frustration, and I really don't blame anybody for my frustration. It's just, what it is. It's just part of the experience. It's just how adamant and like certain people can be without having looked at a lot of this shit. There's times where I'm in a discussion with someone and, there's some misunderstanding where they want to like act like they're, super on point with something. And it's like, my friend, you don't realize how deep this rabbit hole goes and how fucked up it is. And people also don't realize how their own biases get in the way of them getting into these like realms and fields. And I say this with compassion because, these kinds of things, these types of inputs are a big deal. But like, for example, anti-intellectualism is a thing right now, and so therefore there's an attack on academia, and philosophy is commonly held in the sphere of academics in like one's mind relative to associations and connotations one may have about something like philosophy. Philosophy is like broader than that, but because of the way in which we feel the need to categorize things, whether that's based on conditioning or just like how we innately are, I don't know, but it's something that we do. So yeah, like it's just my thing is like I always want to be like polite, and nobody likes to feel dumb. And sometimes when I want to express myself in a given moment relative to the things that I'm aware of, sometimes I feel like I just have to filter myself so damn much because I don't want to like hurt anybody's feelings or make anybody feel some type of way, when it's like, sorry, this is like how you might be off base based on like this idea, and this idea. Like I wrote in my philosophical, like a treatise that I've been working on, like all of our ideas seem to be floating castles in the sky, right? And I say that because, if we imagine floating castles in the sky, in the in the metaphor, like they're sitting on clouds, and clouds shift and move and they change. Like, so do our ideas. And since our ideas are supposed to be models to inform us about reality, or to at least help us navigate it, we kind of have to remember that we can't conflate what is like the picture for what is pictured. The picture of the thing that is pictured is not the same as the thing pictured. So when I like paint a tree, no matter how realistically I paint the tree, it's always going to be a painting of a tree, not the tree that I'm painting. It's a depiction. And a lot of people would say like, oh, like why does any of this matter? And it matters because it's about like our internal orientation to the world. Like if we realize that we're not actually talking about the world half the time, then we don't have to jump down other people's throats about the things that they might think and believe. Like it's funny because I'm having like all these like philosophical issues right now, and like a lot of it ends up boiling down to like an ethical and a moral place, even though it involves ontological situations as well as like epistemical issues, and pretty much like some of the pitfalls of logic. So this is like, I don't know, I guess what I'm showing right now is like the things that like torture me in my mind, because there's certain things that I get and I realize that other people don't get it, and I would like them to get it so that they can be more correct in whatever it is that they're trying to orient themselves in their life, and so that there can be more of a consensus of we don't fucking know. um I just, I mean, I guess this is a good time to like introduce like more about like my, personal philosophy around skepticism. And it's funny because like skepticism to me, it's not a philosophy in the sense that a lot of other things are a philosophy, so like metaphysics by like, Hegel or something like that, like it's just not really the same, or like a logical philosophy or things like that. It's something that is ostensive. You show where the pitfalls of what we may or may not know are. And like there's two things that we can do when we find ourselves in the midst of unknowing or not knowing, which is almost all the time. But we can freak the fuck out about it, which does nobody any good. It doesn't make you like know more all of a sudden because you freak the fuck out. Or we just like accept it and we keep trying to orient ourselves better and better and better in the flux of novelty that we experience in this, miasma of condition that is consciousness or human or whatever. Because I mean, even when I say those things, conscious, human, those are concepts. Like we haven't pinned down consciousness in any way whatsoever. As much as like people want to try to act like they know what's up, we haven't touched that. And so like my thing is like when we make claims without caveats, when we draw, closed-ended conclusions, I am bothered. I am bothered. I am bothered. And it's always going to bother me. Because I see, I can see otherwise, Like if we're not looking for, and like looking hard sometimes for that which like contradicts a claim, then we can't really say that that claim is always going to stand, Like there are certain claims that we want to make about, the universe, and it's like, well, we have to be in certain areas at certain times to know that, because logical induction is also flawed. The more you compound it, the less, the more it moves away from, certainty. If I have an inductive reasoning of 99%, and then the next piece of inductive reasoning is 99%, like the total after that is 98%. If I keep doing that, then that like the percentage of veracity pretty much continues to diminish and go down. So thank you so much for just allowing me to vent. I'm trying to work on getting more of this out there, and this was kind of a stream of consciousness, but I just appreciate it. Yeah, be good to you, be good to others, give me a like and a subscribe, and I appreciate your time. Take care.